whole reason I wanted to get on a soapbox about this topic tonight is so that leaders have the turn technique to actually give body leads for rotation. Hello and welcome to another zany episode of Nerdy West Coast Swing, the podcast with pixels where the anchors are out of this world and the points don't matter. We are here to help train your eyes so you can learn faster and dance better. I'm Cassie Winter.
I'm Alicia Marshall. If you're wondering who are we to be analyzing these pros, Cassie and I both have extensive training and experience in both partnered and solo dancing. Cassie has about 23 years and I have about 25. Tonight we are talking about creating power in rotations, and we're doing a slightly new format, I guess. We're going to start posing a question more so that we talk about, and then we'll kind of wrap it up at the end and give the short answer after the long answer.
Yeah. It'll help kind of like make it easier to digest an episode from us, and also is SEO friendly for the YouTube algorithm.
Yep.
Speaking of which, we keep getting closer to 1,000 subscribers. Please subscribe. Tell your friends. We need an army of nerds.
We are very close. So our question tonight that we're working with is, how do I create power in my rotations? So we will start with the long answer.
Yep. And the video we're watching is Rolf and Karin from their demo from Nordic West Coast Swing Championships. I'm going to drop the link in the chat. So go ahead and give it a watch. And when you're done, we'll get to you answering that question.
I wonder if they'll see this episode on them, because I know they're pretty active on YouTube.
Oh, cool. Hey, if you two are watching, thank you. And we adore you. So
yes.
Nice to meet you. Man, this might be a bit of a lengthy preamble. What we're talking about tonight is, for the most part, independent of role. We'll show how it exhibits in leading and following. But primarily, we're talking about how, as an individual, you add power to your rotations. And for turn technique, there are a lot of elements and variables that go into it. So one that a lot of people are familiar with is axis, right? And that is the vertical line around which your body is rotating. The simplest one is a center axis, where you're just standing balanced on one foot and rotating. A one-footed spin is a center axis rotation. But there are also ones where the axis is on one side of your body or the other, and you're more rotating like a door around a hinge. Another set of variables that is really important to consider, and I feel like this is the one that gets left out of the equation the most, is whether or not you're actually trying to progress across the floor with the rotation. Because there is a huge difference between prepping and following through on a rotation where you're static in one place and you're just spinning on one foot, for example, or you're stepping your feet really quickly and rotating, but you're not traveling anywhere, versus if you're trying to actually progress across the floor with a step and rotation. And those are the ones that we tend to do the most in West Coast Swing, because this is a dance that travels up and down a slot. Both leader and follower do these kinds of rotations all the time. And then the next layer of distinction is, am I rotating on the foot I'm leaving, or am I rotating on the foot I'm arriving on? Or is it a split weight rotation, which tend to be more of a styling choice in West Coast Swing. But the ones that we work with the most is, I'm rotating on the foot I'm leaving, or I'm rotating on the foot that I'm arriving on, or it's a never-ending sequence of those two things. And then the other things, obviously, preps, which is, I think, what most people are familiar with.
Yeah.
Wow, I actually managed to be fairly concise. Is there anything you want to add to that?
I think I want to add just a little bit for follows specifically in terms of like being led through turns. It's slightly different than if you are being released to a turn where you kind of power it more on your own. Because when you're being led through turns, it's more about the connection that you have with your lead. It's not as important for you to be powering through those on your own. In theory, you should be getting most of the power from the lead in terms of the actual rotations.
That would be
Doesn't
nice.
always happen, but in theory, that is correct. But obviously, there's lots of different reasons for follows to also have, need to be under their own power for turns and stuff, especially if you're wanting to style something differently or, like free spins, that type of thing.
Yeah, that is such a good point. And it brings up kind of like the whole reason I wanted to get on a soapbox about this topic tonight is so that leaders have the turn technique to actually give body leads for rotation, because that's what provides the power for the follows. So that way the follows can just follow and not worry about having to also rev the engine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's much easier for everyone involved.
Yeah.
Doesn't always happen.
Yeah. And hopefully after tonight, you'll not only understand like how to power your rotations, but you'll have the ability to see the difference between an arm lead and a body lead for prepping and rotating your follow. Because once you can see it, you cannot unsee it.
So true.
And it always shocks me because like, and it'll hopefully also clear up the like, but they use their arm kind of rebuttal. And I'm like, there's a distinction between the arm doing all the work and the arm being a result of body rotation.
Yeah. Yeah. The arm is involved. Yes. But it's not the only thing doing the work.
Yeah. You want to go steady with your arm. You don't want to be like silent treatment. Anyways, okay. First bad joke of the evening over to the screen share. So this first example is kind of like a really simple version of a telemark because it's starting from a closed position instead of a left side pass with an inside turn for the follow. And what I am looking for here when looking at a leader and what I do as a leader is making sure that the power for this is all me. And then all the follow has to do is follow through, which does involve power, but we'll break that down.
Yeah.
So the first thing I want you to notice is Rolf, and Rolf, if you're watching, if I am using the vowel of the O in your name, if I'm mispronouncing that, please let me know, and I'm sorry. He is rotating his upper body to the left while he is shifting his weight onto his left foot. So right here, he is very much split weight, and he is rotating his upper body while shifting his weight more to his left foot. And then he's following through with that as he releases his right foot. And I think the thing that I see a lot is that a leader A will not have as much intention with that rotation. It needs to be really clear and it needs to be really strong. And when you're in closed position, if you are doing something from your core like that, that's going to feel fine and safe to the follow. If you're trying to do it with your arms independent of your body, or if you're maybe going like 1 inch with your rotation, it's not going to affect the follow. So the thought process that I have in these moments is not, I need to get the follow over here and then I rotate. I am actually using that upper body rotation to initiate my rotation on that foot. So if we're paying attention to his technique, he also, just to highlight, he lifts the toe of his left foot so he can turn out even further, and that'll just make it more comfortable when he fully arrives over that foot. Because if you were to not do that and you arrive over that foot, that's how you get really pigeon-toed on a single standing foot. Just quick detail that I wanted to point out.
Yeah. I also wanted to add, I'm not the best lead, but for me, one way to think about it is for body leads is to think about the follow being just extra attached weight and then moving yourself and just having that follow kind of along for the ride with you. That's just kind of the way I think about it, because I know that's a little bit different, but
yeah, it's interesting because when you think about powering your rotations. The things you need to know is what foot you're going to be on, when your weight is going to arrive over that foot, or when that you're leaving that foot, and what your axis is and what direction you're going. That may seem like a lot, but like the human body is pretty easy to like integrate that. But for some people, you need almost like a framework to talk to your body through. And that's similar with a lot of the things we teach in West Coast Swing. And that's why the best teachers can describe the same piece of technique in multiple different ways. Because one way of thinking of it might, it like unlocks the door in your brain and you're like, oh, I get it now. And it's easier to get your body to do that in a cohesive way instead of a huge long checklist.
Which is exactly why I'm not the best lead, but I like to add in a different way to think about it sometimes because I'm small. So I know that kind of comes with added problems.
So if we back up just like a hot second before this rotation, he's essentially taking side together. And on this last one, he's leaving his upper body behind just a little bit rotationally to his right. It is so subtle. And this is why this is such a great video to analyze for this, because his technique for adding power to his rotations is so refined that visually, if you don't know what to look for, it might look like he's arm leading, but he really isn't. So ever so slightly rotated to his right as he steps onto this foot. And what that does is he's resisting that rotation, that contra body. So his shoulders going one direction while his lower half stays in the previous direction. He's resisting that. So it's like stretching a spring and then releasing that tension and closing his rib cage is what initiates the rotation. So it's not thinking about I'm trying to get my follow to move. It's prepping myself and closing my own rotation. And then when you have a follow that understands how to feel that kind of clear rotation, they follow through with it. And you don't need technically that much power to have a really powerful effect. And so it just becomes infinitely refinable and clear over time. That being said, you can't add a lot of power. Just watch Jordan and Tot do any accelerated rotations. That's what that is. But so Rolf is prepping himself and then he's closing. And what I mean by that is there's a difference between like, it's almost like throwing a hook punch, like punching your way through a rotation versus creating some sort of expansion or contra body rotation and then letting it come back to neutral with power. So, and breath work can be really helpful for this. So you can inhale for the expansion or the rotation, and then exhale. You just want to close in. If you think of a figure skater who's doing infinite 1 foot spins, they often start big with their legs and arms extended away from them. And then as they want to continue the rotation and accelerate it, they bring their limbs in as close to their center as possible. And that's what creates the speed. So we're basically doing that, but on a much smaller scale. Smaller expansion, but we're still wanting to close all the way to the center. And coordinating that close with an exhalation from the diaphragm can be really helpful. That being said, if you have blood pressure issues like myself, it's also a good way to make yourself pass out. That's a side note. So just keep in mind that the exhalation part can be really helpful if you don't have blood pressure problems.
It can be a good like learning tool.
Yeah, it can be good. It would be nice to be able to use exhalation for all rotations, but I would hit the floor.
It'd be unfortunate.
All right, so I think we've now like completed most of the preamble. So this is going to be about looking for all of these things now. So he is extending his left foot, prepping himself, which is also prepping her. That's the magic of it. By leaving his right side rotated back a little bit as he's stepping onto that foot, it's prepping her into the pocket of his hand, and you can see how shaped she is. And that is helping prep her to come around. All right, I think we've spent enough time on this one, and we could spend the entire episode on this one, but I want to move on. So let's look at some other stuff. So this is another one of those examples that might look, he's using his arm. But when it's a cross arm, when it's like a handshake situation, that's when it can really look like it's an arm lead. And I'm like, well,
Yeah.
I mean, so as Rolf is scrolling across the slot and also towards Karin, he is very slowly opening his body up to face us. So from facing down the slot to facing us. And if my hands are correct, he is rotating to his left. Tonight's the kind of brain fog night where I don't trust myself to get my left and rights correct.
Yeah,
So,
I feel you.
Okay, cool. He's stepping forward onto this foot, forward and across. I'm just looking at his feet right now. I want to pay attention to what his feet are doing. He's taking another forward step, but you can see how his foot rotates in a little bit. And what that tells me is he's actually rotating off of his back foot. And this is why I talked about this in the preamble, because there's a distinction between taking a step somewhere and then after you've already had a foot strike, then trying to pivot onto it, versus pushing off of the foot you're leaving in a rotational way. So you're landing rotated on your new foot.
Yeah.
And so what he's doing here is he's landing rotated ever so slightly onto this foot. So he's already initiating his rotation. And then he's hooking under and behind here. And this is such a great contra body position that he's in. And it's creating a lot of tension in his own body that he can then release. And this is the thing as a leader. You want to make sure that you're giving the follow that stretch moment for their prep. And that often means you are getting a stretch moment for the prep and you still release it in, but oftentimes you don't actually do the rotation as a leader. But you still need to be doing that in, out, in, rotate, in. You still need to be doing that so the follow feels it. That's a body lead. When you are trying to just marionette the follow, that is so difficult to follow. And then it's basically the follow's responsibility to create all the power, because there is no power inside the connection for the follow to use and react to. And often it puts the follow in an incorrect position for their prep. But as a leader, if you're doing it yourself, the follow will do it too. It's kind of like when we talked about the basic kind of New Yorker version of a sugar push. If as long as the leader is doing it, the follow will feel it.
As long as it's being led properly.
Well, if the leader is dancing it properly themselves, prepping and releasing their own energy correctly, that will be communicated through the handhold.
I also wanted to add something in terms of that foot that he's stepping onto, that slightly different direction. To me, I don't know if you agree with this or not, but to me, him stepping with that foot rotated slightly more forward tells me that he's also kind of prepping to resist in a different direction.
Yeah, definitely. Because it's very much a brace step. So the step is out ahead of him. And that's in part why he's rotating, is because he wants to brace and counter the energy. So that's a really good point. Thanks for bringing that up. So he has rotated off of this foot to land partially rotated on this foot, and then he's following through with that rotation as he hooks behind. And you can see how he's really leaning in this direction to counter her. And this is the part, it's actually, he's prepping the prep. So as a leader, if you want to follow to be prepped on 2, you need to prep yourself to actually get into that position properly on 2. It's it's
It's always 2 steps
meta.
ahead of things.
That's why, like, whenever I'm working with leads one-on-one, if they say I'm having X problem on Y count, I watch them, and it's often 2 or 3 counts ahead of time where the first domino that's causing the problems gets knocked over.
Yeah.
And the problem they're having actually needs to get solved further up the chain. And would you agree that, does that happen when you're helping follows as well?
Yeah, tends to.
Yeah. And then if you get really nerdy, which if you're watching this, yes, that kind of becomes, this is the song that doesn't end. You just keep going far back enough that you're like, wait, now I'm ahead again. Anyways, so he's very much closed in right here. And then he opens up. So he's releasing this tension. So his hips are rotated this way, this foot in front, his shoulders are rotated this way, and this shoulder and arm in front. He is basically doing the equal and opposite of that as he steps onto his right foot right here. I'm going to delete my drawing so it's easier to see him.
You mind if I add something about it?
Yeah, please do.
So this that Cassie is talking about does not work if Karin doesn't do her part. So that being said, what I want you to look at for her is where her left shoulder is at, right? So it starts more forward initially and then pulls back. And that's where she's getting that extra weight and getting into that more stretched position in order to give him the weight tension that he needs to make this powerful.
Yep. So if we go back to here, I want to highlight this rotation again. So basically he's doing the opposite. So as he's sending this foot this way, he is bringing his hips here and he's bringing his shoulders here, and he's unraveling himself. And the key there really is the upper body. Like if he didn't unwind his lower body, it could still technically work for her if it was just his upper body. And the thing about learning this technique as a leader that is so powerful is it helps you lead follows with less technique. So one of the reasons why what he's doing in this dance looks so subtle is not just his technique, but her technique, like Alicia was talking about. He does not need to use as much rotation to prep her because she responds to it appropriately.
Yeah.
If he were dancing with a lower level follow, all he would have to do is exaggerate that rotation to help shape the follow properly. And he would probably also have to place his arm ever so slightly differently. So he would still open up, but he may end up just adjusting where his hand is placed across the slot. So that way it's on an appropriate rail for the follow. But often, in order to lead a follow who doesn't have as much skill, you do the exact same thing, just with the volume turned up. That's the basis from which to accommodate lower technique follows.
Yeah. And I want to add to that yes, you can do that. You probably still won't get the same feeling as you would with a higher level follow.
Oh yeah, no.
You can create it, make it similar. It just, there won't be as much weight behind it, won't be as much power behind it.
Yeah.
But you can certainly create something very similar, that looks more or less the same.
Yeah. And this is one of the reasons why like lower level follows enjoy dancing with higher level leads the most, and why they look better.
Yeah.
Because the follow is the result in the equation of West Coast swing. The follower, and sometimes the roles switch, like a follow will contribute something and then the lead follows it. But the majority of the time, the leader is the one initiating it and the follow follows through on it. And it is much easier for a higher level leader to shape a lower level follow than it is for a higher level follow to create those good shapes when a leader isn't giving them to you.
Yeah, tell me about it.
I know. I know this is extra spicy comment for you right now. Yeah, this is one of the reasons why some follows get left behind competitively, because they do such a good job of fixing the problems that it makes their lead look amazing.
Yeah.
And that's not new level, new devil. That is something else entirely. But it's an unfortunate symptom of expertise in our community.
Yeah.
Because if, for example, if Corinne were to get herself into this shape, which is prepped, but like gently prepped, and he were to have not done the things that I have been ranting about, he would still look good.
Yep.
Because he did the work.
Now, however, she would probably have to connect in a different way in order to make it work the way that he is seeming to want it to work.
Right.
But it still look fine.
Right. It's so frustrating. So all of this prep work that I'm talking about, whether or not the leader is also prepping themselves to rotate in addition to the follow or independent of the follow, or if they're just prepping their own kind of microcosm of the rotation so that the follow can feel the prep properly.
One eternity later.
So it's the concept of releasing energy. So a lot of what we talk about in West Coast swing is not simply about like, I want my follow to move forward on one, therefore I move back on one. And that is a training wheels concept we teach brand new dancers to help them start being successful right away. But it's a training wheel concept, because what actually needs to happen is the leader. The needer. Yes, leaders are needy. Yeah. Anyways, if you're a needy leader, let us know in the comments. Leaders need to be letting the follow know that they want the follow to come forward on one before one.
Yeah.
That information needs to be received ahead of the thing that you want to happen when you want it to happen. And so that means leaders need to have the intention of moving backwards ahead of time. And that's why the anchor is so powerful, because it's a prep.
Yeah.
It's a way to stop and redirect energy smoothly, comfortably, and also powerfully. So leading a follow forward on one should feel like a release of energy, not a generation of energy.
Yep.
And the same thing happens when you're prepping and leading a turn. The prep is where you're building up the energy. And the follow through on that prep is actually releasing that energy. So it can actually, it's stretching a spring and then letting it go, and it closes back on its own. That's what it is. So once this point happens, all the work is done. And now it's just releasing that energy and following through.
Yep.
It feels so good when it's done, right? All right. Yay. I remembered the thing. Thank you all for letting me find my brain wherever it had gone.
Can I add one more thing in for Corinne? So, because we've been talking about this whole time, like, this doesn't work unless the follow does their part too. Now, moving through this here, you can see that he catches the waist, and for her, she now needs to catch into that and then keep rolling through it. in order to help him move, right? So it's one of those things where, like, if you are a follow and you kind of are very easy to start and stop, this is the type of thing that you're probably not going to get through super smoothly, right? Because this gets fairly, like, it can get fairly heavy in the weight in terms of, like, you start rotating and you don't have any resistance, and then you start to get some resistance through it. And so it's one of those things where if you aren't in control of that, if you don't know how to drop your weight and keep rotating, it's not gonna be a telemark.
Right. And we did do a whole episode on telemarks. So in the recording, I'll link it somewhere above. But this is actually what Alicia is talking about, is the reason why the slot actually shifts towards us in the camera just a little bit. Because she's finishing her rotation at about closer to, I don't know, 80 degrees instead of 90. And you can tell her left foot is in front, which means that her left shoulder is also in front.
Yeah.
For Rolf to have been able to actually go drive through the slot and end up on the other end of it instead of the slot. Wow, my brain fog is amazing. Instead of the slot coming towards us like it is, she would have had to have come back further. So instead of finishing in almost like a leader's third foot, she would have had to have kept rotating to her left and finishing in a follow's third foot. And that's not saying that she did anything wrong.
Right. It's possible that's exactly what she wanted to do.
Yeah. This is a much more gentle telemark. Like everything in West Coast Swing, you can decide how much oomph you're putting into it. But it's when, as a follow, you don't know that this is a place where you get to decide how much oomph you put in. Especially when, like, if a leader is prepping a lot of energy into that initial rotation, and therefore a lot of energy is getting released. As a follow, if you stop under rotated, the leader is going to suddenly be like, oh, you're in front of me.
Yeah.
And then they're going to kind of scramble around you a little bit. So it's helpful to know, to kind of try to put into it what the leader put into it.
Right. And I also want to add on exactly the way to really add that power in for the follow. So you kind of get this point where you're moving across, right? So you can't become grounded or anything. But once you get to that point where you're no longer going to be traveling, but you are now in the spot that you were going to stay, you just need to finish rotating, right? You need to make sure that you have soft knees. If you are like still straight, if you are like up on a releve for your feet and you have more locked knees, you can't get any power. What you need to do is kind of more get into the heels, place the heels on the ground, soften the knees, and then you can use the floor. You can press into the floor to finish.
Yep. And I just wanted to highlight the counts really quick. So in a standard telemark, this would be count and of the 3 and where the follow is striking with their left foot. And then the first part of really driving through that rotation, the way a follow should in a telemark, is making sure that your 4 is across the slot more so than down the slot. So that way you're not adding length to the slot that the leader has no chance to get across. Most follows don't have a hard time with this. It's the next count. It's count 5 where the struggle really comes in. So as the follow rotates on that right foot, if they do not bring this side of their body all the way back, like we were talking about earlier, that's what's going to make the leader go around. And you can see how he's like half a floorboard difference. And again, this might have been exactly what they're aiming for. We're just pointing it out so you can understand where that difference comes from when you see a telemark that just goes straight and it feels like precision versus one that kind of veers at an angle. And that's the difference. It's the follow.
Yeah.
Some teachers teach it as if the leader has to like hi-ya the follow off the slot, and I disagree with that. It should be a result of the prep and the release of that prep, and then the follow following through. That's hard to say. With that rotation. Would you agree with that?
I would. And I also wanted to point out, because Corinne doesn't quite follow all the way through, you can see that her heels are slightly up off the floor. If she were to really set back all the way and like move through that, her heels would probably be touching the floor.
Yep.
Anywho, we should probably move on to our next one.
We should. Let me look through this one really quick. We've done a whole episode on one-footed spins, so let's skip that one. Again, I will link it above in the recording. Let's talk about this one, because this is a really great prep and follow through. So this is one of those where it can look like an arm lead again, but it's not. So when Rolf is stepping backwards, the first thing that's happening is he is maintaining the center counterpoint until he needs to bring it towards him to actually lead her forward. So if we back up a little bit through his anchor, he's really traveling away, but the handhold very much doesn't travel anywhere. It's like really staying in this area, and it's not going that way, and it's not going that way. And then when he's ready to lead her forward, it's happening because his weight is going from here, which is above the center of his feet, to here, being over his standing foot. That's actually what's leading her forward. And if you watch how that is affecting the handhold, the handhold is actually coming down the slot to the screen left. And that's what's leading her forward.
Yeah, his arm is actually staying in a very similar position.
Yeah.
As he's initiating that forward movement.
Yep.
And it's moving in order to direct where the handhold is going, not to pull on it. So
the arm is a result of the body lead and can be used for minor course adjustment, course correction. So then the next thing that happens is, first of all, I just want to highlight the way he's rotating his shoulder. So his elbow kind of rotates open back and to the wall in the back. And what that's doing is it's setting up his shoulder to add power. It's a really sneaky detail, and I like it a lot. Because if you think about two of the basic types of push-ups, if you were to do push-ups, there's a push-up where your hands are wide and your elbows are going out. Then there's a tricep push-up where your hands are right underneath your shoulders and your elbows are grazing against your rib cage. The tricep push-ups require significantly more strength because it's depending on a smaller muscle. And by him rotating his elbow up like that, but it's not affecting the hand. She's not getting affected by that negatively. So yes, there's a twist, but it's only happening because she's almost palm up to begin with. So I'm saying this, do not wrench a fellow's wrist. Nah. But what that's doing is it's allowing him to then use his chest muscles to apply power to the turn. And it's so sneaky. Very, very nicely done, sir. But the other thing that's happening is you can see how he's very much expanding his chest too. It's not just the elbow, it's the chest, and it's like pulling back on a bow to fire your arrow. And so he's creating a resisted release across his chest, and then he can close it like we were talking about at the very beginning. And you can see right here, it's a chain of cause and effect. So this is the thing you will never be able to unsee. And sorry and not sorry. This is why we frame through things. I want you to notice how there's a chain of cause and effect. The things start at the shoulder, then move to the elbow, and then translate to the hand. So, like, yes, they're all moving at once, but there is much more happening with the shoulder and elbow to begin with. Look at that change in the shoulder and elbow versus how much the hand changes. The hand is really not doing hardly anything,
Yeah.
right? It's just lifting a little bit and extending away from him ever so slightly, but his elbow is traveling really far through space. So it's
Mhm.
rotation in the shoulder. That is that release from the chest expanding. It's that motion that's happening really fast. And then the hand is lagging behind a little bit to
Yeah.
translate that.
Mhm.
And you can see how much power is going into it because his tattoo jiggles a little bit. Like, it's such a helpful teaching tool. So, really, really pay attention to his tattoo. And it's like, yeah, his flesh and his tattoo jiggle ever so slightly because of the power of him closing his arm to his center.
Yeah.
And then it translated to the hand. And that is what is creating all of that power.
Mhm.
And that's why it's a body lead, because the initiation of the movement came from the body. And then over the course of time, just a few frames in a video that translated to the hand and then to the follow.
Yep. I also want to add in for Corinne on this. She keeps that arm relaxed. You don't see her locking out the arm that's
Mhm.
connected, that's going up over her head. What that will do is just nullify any power that you can get from that. Because then you are not able to have that, the haya that Cassie was talking about. You
Right.
can't let that translate through the rest of the body because if your arm is rigid, it's gonna like hit a hit a wall more or less, right? So
Yep.
you need to make sure that as a follow in this particular movement, you need to make sure that your arm is connected to the back, but not like pressing, right? That's one thing that I very frequently see with follows is because they're searching for connection up over the head. And so they press, and it makes this shape that like prevents the lead from doing things or
Yeah.
accelerating things, because it's like hitting a wall.
Yeah.
So you want to make sure that that's nice and relaxed. And you can even see like her arm has this like swing to it as she's moving through it. So it's still connected, but like she can still move it. She's not like pressing up into his hand.
Right.
So that's what helps create power for her,
Yeah.
is to be more relaxed and allow herself to be powered through it.
Yep. And then last note I want to make here is how when you start incorporating this technique, regardless of what role you're in, but this can be so helpful for leaders who struggle with their free arm, is your free arm helps counterbalance the movement. So you can see right here, while the connection, the prep that Corinne is going to feel is happening in this shoulder, you can see how that expansion moment is continuing and following through on the other side of his body. It's a equal and opposite on either side to then close. And when he closes with the connected hand, he also closes with his free arm. You can see his right arm swings forward. And then the same thing happens as he's going through this. As his left hand is going above him, his right hand is swinging back behind him again and out to the side. And you can see it's just equal and opposite on either side of his body. And then it follows through. Yep. And so, like, the easiest way, like, to really work on your free arm is just to allow it to naturally counterbalance and resist or assist whatever is naturally happening in your body. So yeah, look for it. You will not be able to unsee it. So we talked about the front half of a telemark at the very beginning of the dance. But on this one, out the other end, they stay in closed position and he preps another rotation immediately afterwards. And then more telemark. It's like 3 times. Yeah. We're just going to talk about the middle one. Because that's a lot. So this is that 3 and we were talking about. Here's the 4 when her right foot strikes. And then count 5 is when she lands on her left foot. I want to talk about how he is managing his rotations to finish by prepping her for another rotation at the very end. So if we back up a little bit, he's in turnout with both feet. He's about split weight here. As he is pushing off of his right foot, you can tell by the way he's almost like leaving that foot behind and really pressing off of the ball that he is using that to rotate himself. So he's pushing off of that foot in a rotational manner. It's not just linear. So that's initiating the movement. And then because of her rotation, it's helping him take this step right here. And if she had, like we were talking about earlier, continued rotating to her left to go 90 degrees instead of like 75, 80, he wouldn't be shifting slots towards us at all. But again, that's no biggie right here. What I want to talk about is how this moment right here, he is still continuing his rotation. And so what's happening is, yes, there is already rotation happening. So the foot he is now leaving is adding to that rotation. This is the song that never ends that I was joking about at the very beginning. But as he strikes this right foot down and collects his feet, you can see he starts rotating on the ball of his foot. He's lifting his heel just enough that he can rotate on the ball of his foot. And then he's letting his left foot hook under and behind. And we're starting to get that corkscrew contra body happening again, where his hips are rotated this way, but his, sure. And his shoulders are rotated that way.
Yeah. Can I add in something real fast?
Do, yes.
I just wanted to add in about the rotation on the standing foot. Because you said that he brings his heel up and it's so subtle that you can barely see it. You don't necessarily have to bring the heel up. It just has to be the weight is pressing more into the front part of the foot rather than all the way through. So
yeah.
Just wanted to mention that.
Yeah. Because it's different for everybody. You'll find your sweet spot of how much pressure you have to take off of your heel for that part of your foot to glide cleanly on the floor. Because some people's joints need more release there and others need less. But it's just really important that there's some weight getting released from that heel so he's not completely evenly weight distributed across his foot. So he can rotate on the ball of his foot.
Just wanted to mention that. That's all I wanted to add.
Yeah. And then another thing I wanted to say is that tends to be a slightly different standard for masculine presenting people and female presenting people. Not necessarily role based, but actually gender based. Because I would say that's a very common thing for leaders to really you don't see a separateness between the heel and the floor, whereas judges tend to want to see at least a little bit of air in between the heel and the floor. So just something to consider. Yay. I consider that a personal preference kind of situation. All right. So he's here in this like contra body situation, and then he's doing the equal and opposite out the other side. And that is what is prepping her, drawing her forward on her left foot into a prepped shape to then release. And again, it's a release. It's not a generation of energy because the prep is what was generating the energy.
Mm-hmm.
So if we go from here again, I'm going to add a frame. I'm going to go nice and slow. So he's bracing on that back foot. It's out ahead of him in relationship to the direction he's going, so he can start resisting traveling away from her. And then as he is stepping to the side and back on his right foot, you can see that the relationship between his shoulders and hips, that rotation, is changing. And then the other thing that's going on is the closed arm elbow, which I have talked about at length in other videos, so I'm not going to talk about that right now. We're just talking about the body lead that's going on. But it is that prep that's contra body, then to her prep that is also contra body as a leader. You're basically doing the equal and opposite of the other side. And this is where these things can start to feel really natural once you understand the mechanics of them. Because when you are trying to force certain shapes without the foundation of the shapes your body wants to make in those contexts, it's going to be really difficult. Yeah. So practicing winding yourself up and unwinding. Like a really simple way to practice this is the hokey pokey. When you put your right foot in, you bring your right shoulder back. When you put your right foot out, your right shoulder comes forward, and you're actually counterbalancing rotationally your foot. Yeah. And so that's a really simple way to start integrating the contra body in your body. So that way it's natural and not forced. Yeah. Yeah. So I think I have said enough words. There has been an entire thesis amount of information. Is there anything you want to add before we stop the screen share?
I think so. I think that's pretty much it. We talked about a little bit new format of having a question for the videos that we're talking about. And our question for today was, how do I add power into my rotations? So do you want to do a little recap?
Yeah. So the first thing to understand is those kind of base variables. So we talked about axis. We talked about where your weight is relative to your feet, and also whether you're rotating in place or you're also trying to travel across the floor while you're rotating, because each of those variables contribute to how you add power. And particularly in West Coast swing, the one we're dealing with the most is we're traveling while we're rotating. And so understanding, am I trying to use the foot I'm leaving to rotate, so you're pushing off in a rotational fashion? Or is the foot that you're arriving on, are you going to add torque to that foot to create rotation? So those are different scenarios. And the main thing is prepping yourself properly. So the way you add power to rotations is to prep yourself, often in an open fashion. So like if you're drawing back a bow to release an arrow, you're creating this resisted release across your chest. And then to release that energy, to actually generate the power for the turn, you're closing it in. You're not thinking about punching across with your arm or your shoulder. You're really just bringing things in and releasing the heel off the floor pressure-wise, so that way you can rotate on the ball of your foot. And then another thing that we really didn't have time to talk about tonight, but we could maybe do another episode on that, is how to use the floor to really push off, because that is the other key. And understanding how to add torque to pushing off of a foot is really important. But yeah.
Yep. And then I'll just do quick recap of what I said for follows specifically. I talked about really that grounding, softening the knees to like allow that continue of the rotation. And then I talked about arms. I talked about having the arms up over the head and having it relaxed because technically your lead should be powering you. So the way that you can add power to your turns when you're being turned is to allow it to happen. That's basically what I added. I didn't add a lot tonight.
Yep. No, you were great. I think you kept me mostly on the rails. I tried to run away a few times. My brain tried to run away a couple of times from me. So I think we got there. Next time, we are talking about how to commit weight. So might talk about some of that work from the floor next time. But it's really about how do I actually commit weight and ground myself so my partner can feel it. That's what we're going to be talking about next time. Between now and then is our next What Went Wrong workshop on Saturday, I think the 16th. So not this Saturday, but next Saturday. And we're going to be analyzing a Wild Wild Westy video.
Yep.
And that is going to be fun. So thank you all so much for joining us.
Yep.
We'll catch you again next time. And Alicia has the orders to rein me in and to guide me in case I go way too far in any one direction or if I just fall down a tangent. So all leads are technically arm leads unless you are somehow using the powers of your telepathy.
That would be interesting.
Why am I imagining Roro and Victoria trying to do that?
That does seem like something
just like
they like screw around with. Yeah.
And now I'm envisioning Kyle standing up from his chair in the back and just staring at both of them, but looking confused and not actually doing any dancing as his supporting comedic contribution.
Which reminds me of the Glenn and Susan dance from Wild Wild Westy, where RJ made himself a little cameo.
That was so good. That was so
If you haven't seen it, go watch it. It's good.
Oh, so good. Wait, where was I going with that? Oh,
I'm not sure.
The brain fog is strong.
You're saying regardless if you did.
I know there was the word regardless, but the rest of it fell out of my head. This is my 5th Zoom call today. I've been on Zoom like for a full day today. Been a day.
I think it was
hopefully it'll come back. It'll probably come back.
Probably.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to the next. Oh, that's what I wanted to talk about.